Welcome to Toni Time. What you've just seen is Caddy Shake. Everybody knows Caddy Shake. We've all grown up with Caddy Shake. Sorry, Pat. This is Pat Brymer, and Pat is a puppeteer. His company is Brymer Creations. Pat lives in Los Angeles, and dear friend of mine for many, many, many years. Many years. And Pat created the gopher on Caddy Shake. How exciting. And everybody always is asking him about the gopher. In fact, when Tiger Woods, a few years back, did a commercial, they called Pat to come in and use the gopher and create the gopher. So I'll let Pat talk instead of me talking for him.
I have to talk?
Well, yes, you do have to talk.
Okay.
Because puppeteers, you never see.
No, but you have to have a puppet on your hand to talk.
Well, I know. So welcome to our show, Pat.
Thank you.
Welcome
it's great to
Maine.
be here. Thank you.
And tell us all about Caddy Shake and when you were filming the movie.
Well, it was probably the first major film that I ever did, and it was pretty exciting.
Now, who was in the movie? Bill Murray?
Oh, a lot of people. Chevy Chase, Bill Murray, Ted Knight.
I remember Ted Knight.
There were others too, but those were the main stars. Rodney Dangerfield.
Oh God, gets no respect.
No.
Absolutely.
But it was great. And let me tell you a little secret about that movie. They filmed the entire movie in Florida with all the actors, and they used a crummy little glove puppet for the gopher. And you just saw him pop out of the hole from about 100 yards away, and he couldn't do anything with any of the actors because it was just a little hand puppet. So the director decided they had to do something better. So they had a new gopher constructed that was more of a realistic gopher, but it was totally mechanical, and that's why it could do all the things with its ears and dancing with its arms. And so they ended up reshooting all the gopher scenes in Hollywood.
So now during this time, because a lot of people don't understand how technical being a puppeteer is and creating the costumes. And in fact, Pat has on his website the first photo of all the puppets he did make.
Well, a lot of them.
Well, a lot of them. I mean, he's done a lot of commercial work. But if we can flash up the one where all the puppets are around Pat for a moment there. Now for Caddy Shake, I mean, when you're filming a movie, it doesn't happen in 5 minutes, but your part as a puppeteer, setting it up, showing up where you had to show up, where were you during that time on set?
With the gopher?
With the gopher.
I was underneath a wagon that was planted with sod.
Oh, really?
With real grass and dirt.
So what we see on television, we see the gopher, the grass, and you're under that.
I'm under that. That's all you see. They took this wagon and they rolled the wagon wherever in the golf course they had to match up from the original footage. And so all you see is the horizon line on the back of the wagon, and you don't see the front of it where I'm underneath.
Okay. All right.
That's what they did, and then they just shot all the footage that way. And then there's a scene where he's in the gopher tunnel at the end, and Bill Murray is trying to flood him out, and then he uses explosives and all of this, and the gopher's running through the tunnel, and that was a set that they built of the tunnel, which of course was just the back of the tunnel basically, and they had it was like being in a mine car in a mine shaft. They had me on a rollie on a track, so I could run with a gopher, and the background would be traveling behind him.
And that's what we showed at the start of the show.
You showed him. You showed the clip of him at the very beginning of the movie, in the titles, burrowing through the golf course.
Right.
Yeah, making one of his tunnels. Right.
Okay.
Right. But it takes hours to set those shots up.
Yeah, I mean, when you're on a movie set, it's hurry up and wait. You might as well take a book, whatever, because you're not going to walk in there and you're not going to shoot the scene and you're not going to be finished with it for hours and days at times.
And this could be just, 15 seconds of film.
Well, what do they say in the old days? 15 seconds of film is like 3 days.
Just about. It
Just-
seems that way.
Yeah, yeah. And you have to have it. You have to hit your mark. You've got to be able to. If they call to redo it again, you have to be able to do exactly what you did before.
That's right.
And hit your mark every time. Because if you don't hit your mark every time, you cost the studio money. We can't do that. Now, moving on from Caddy Shake, and everyone saw the photos of all the puppets that Pat made. Now, you've also worked a lot of commercial work.
Yes.
I remember the Kellogg's cornflakes, the big strawberry.
Strawberry.
You did the strawberry when he was coming out of his house on the sidewalk. That was wonderful. Now, how long does it take you to make a costume like?
Well, the big costumes are, they're even more time consuming than the puppets. This particular costume that Toni is talking about was for Kellogg's cereal, and it was a giant strawberry that had an actor inside of it with his face showing and his arms coming out, and he was holding a briefcase. It was a businessman
Right, I remember
leaving
that.
the house in the morning to go to work.
Yeah.
Why he was a strawberry, I guess it's because that's good on Kellogg's cornflakes or something.
Or I think, as I remember, they came out with 3 different kinds of cereals. One was
It
a
could be.
strawberry, one was banana, whatever. But you did Paula Abdul when she was on the road concert tour.
Yeah, she had done a video originally,
With,
a music video with a character called Scat.
and everybody remembers Scat Cat.
And it was an animated cartoon then.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah,
Really?
in the video.
Oh,
But the concert tour, they
it was
used
the costume character.
They used a combination of the animation, and then the animation turned into the live costume dancer.
Yeah, and that was a good scene.
That
So-
was a lot of fun to make that costume and work with the dancer.
Oh, I bet. At the end of the show, you'll get all the information, Pat's website. You can go there, and you still have that on your
There's
website.
pictures of that on the website.
Okay, good. And then the other surprise is Pat is the father of Lamb Chop. Yes.
Woohoo.
Well, he is. He worked with Sheri Lewis for 20 years until the day she passed away. I remember when Pat would come into town and he'd be working shows and Lamb Chop was part of it, and I'd look around my apartment at the time and see all these little lamb chops all over the living room. So what was it like to work with Sheri?
Well, it's probably the best 20 years I ever spent in my career. She was great. She was probably the world's foremost female ventriloquist, and probably still is. I can't think of that many female ventriloquists
can't
that have
either.
surpassed her. But she was also just a total entertainer. She could sing, she could dance, she could play the violin, she could play the piano, she could conduct symphony orchestras. Good
Wow.
grief, is there nothing she couldn't know? There wasn't
She could
anything
do it.
she couldn't do.
In fact, we have a photo. Steve, could you flash that up on the screen of Sheri Lewis and the chorus girls and the puppets that Pat made on each side of Sheri as they were doing a kick line like the Rockettes, basically.
They were 2 life-size puppets that were the same size as Sheri, as you'll see, and that was the first project I did for her, was to build the dancing ladies, and she was. They were not easy puppets to do. She had to go to a gym for, good grief, weeks and weeks and weeks to
Really?
work out to be able to hold those things, because they were on a harness that went around her neck, and then her arms went up into the puppets from here. So she was basically totally supporting them. And they weighed a lot. And she was very tiny.
What, you said she was 5
She's
foot?
5 feet tall.
Wow.
But it was fun. It was a lot of fun to do that, and exciting to have that be the first project. It was my real, how you say, litmus test, where she was checking me out to see what I could do, and she was very happy with it. But she used it mainly for stage presentations.
Okay. What fascinated me about that was you had a rod that went through the shoes. So when she lifted her leg did the kick line. All the puppets were doing it. And I mean, of course, I'm not coordinated at all. I would be tripping and falling. But that just, looking at that and seeing her do the knee up and kicking, and all the puppets following her.
Oh, it was great. No, it was a great illusion.
Yeah, yeah.
It's an old vaudeville trick.
Oh, is it?
From years and years ago. Yeah, and Sheri, you have to realize, grew up towards the end of vaudeville. So she saw these things, and her father helped her work out a lot of, well, in addition to that, she could do magic tricks because her father was the honorary magician of New York City.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, so he had a lot of magician friends. He taught her a lot of magic tricks. He had a lot of these old vaudeville tricks up his sleeve. So, and she just absorbed it like a sponge. So.
Was she an only child, or did she have siblings?
No, she has a sister.
Okay.
Barbara.
Barbara. Okay.
Who's an interior decorator.
But she didn't pick up the singing, the
No,
dancing
no,
that
that
Sheri
was
picked
no,
up.
Not at all. That was strictly
Wow.
Sheri.
Wow.
And her mother was an instructor in the public schools in New York in the music department. So she taught Sheri a lot of the music skills, playing the piano and.
I mean, Sheri, was amazingly talented.
She was a very disciplined performer,
Yeah.
and she worked and worked and worked and worked, and we rehearsed and rehearsed and rehearsed. She wouldn't even put it in front of a camera unless it was just perfect.
That's what we don't have today.
I know, she was great. I had
Yeah.
the best time.
Oh, absolutely.
And we were good friends as well. We went out and socialized and went to movies. I always had to take her to puppet-oriented movies. She wouldn't go with anyone
really?
else but me. Yeah, how about that? So we were dates for these movies, and then we'd walk into the theater, and she'd get mobbed, and I'd just be kind of standing there looking at my watch. Puppeteer, nobody knows me.
Well, no, we were talking about puppeteers. You don't know who these people are.
No.
They don't have a face.
We don't. We're the faceless talent.
Well, Pat also did, we'll come back to Sheri because
Okay.
I find Sheri very fascinating, but you did a Perry Como show
Yeah.
in New York. Tell us about Perry Como and his show and what you did.
This was a Christmas special. It was one of his annual Christmas specials. I think it was Perry Como's Christmas in New York. How's that for an original title? But that's right. You were in New York then.
Yeah, I was in New York then.
I think this must have been about 1983, 1984, somewhere in there. But there was a scene in the special. The guest star was Michelle Lee on this Christmas special. And she, in the one scene, she played a very uppity actress, Broadway actress, who had no life but the theater. And of course, she comes out of the theater, out of the stage door on Christmas Eve, and has nowhere to go. Mm-hmm. No family. So when she comes out on the street, there's a cab parked there with a cab driver who's a puppet. And then there was a newspaper stand with an old newspaper vendor in the stand, and then there was a homeless woman on the street, and they were all puppets. And of course, she's lamenting about, the cab driver asks her where he can take her, and she said, "Oh, I don't have anywhere to go." And he said, "But it's Christmas Eve, you have to go somewhere." And well, to make a long story short, all the puppets get together with Michelle, and they all sing "We Need a Little Christmas," which is one of the songs from MAME.
Yes, it is.
And this was another very glamorous showbiz situation where I spent the entire night and morning laying on the bottom of a gutted taxi cab with a puppet up in the air, and it was raining. So that made it really nice and cold and pleasant. And the window had to stay open, so I was constantly getting rained on. It's very glamorous work, but it was one of the. Everything we do is different.
Yeah.
Totally different, so it never gets boring.
No, absolutely, absolutely. And to open your own company doing this.
Yeah.
When did you open your company?
Well, I started working. Well, let me backtrack just a little, give you a little history.
Okay.
I started working with puppets as a hobby when I was like 5 years old.
Really?
That was during the era of Howdy Doody, so my first puppet was a Howdy Doody marionette with the strings. And that's what I started with was marionettes. So that just, anything that had to do with puppets when I was a kid was was wonderful. I used to watch Howdy Doody, and I'd watch Sheri Lewis, Paul Winchell, another wonderful ventriloquist. So that's what got my appetite going for puppets and puppetry. And I continued that through high school, and then I kind of stopped it when I got into college because I didn't have time to really pursue it. I had to try and get through college. And I managed a movie theater when I was in college so that I could make money to go to school. So I managed the movie theater at night, and I couldn't do anything. I couldn't do any productions at night in the college because I had to work at the movie theater. So I put in all of my hours in the theater department in the costume shop during the day, and that's where I learned to do sewing and a lot of the craft techniques that we still use today in building puppets. So that's how I got started. But when my last couple of months in college, I thought, you know what, I don't want to stay here forever and manage a movie theater. So I sent Sid and Marty Krofft Productions a resume in Los Angeles. At that time, the Krofft brothers had 3 live puppet theaters in the Six Flags amusement parks. So I sent them a resume and I said, I will do anything in your company just to have the chance to work with you. And I'm a puppeteer and I've been doing it since I was 5, and I love the Krofft puppets. And a week later I got a call from their head of production for the live shows, and he said, are you available to go to the St. Louis Theater and start rehearsing? And I went, yeah, sure.
Wow.
So I started working for the Kroffts in St. Louis at Six Flags over Mid-America, and while I was there, they were casting 12 puppeteers, 4 from each of their 3 theaters, to work in a new show in Las Vegas that was being built for Raquel Welch. She was the only human in it.
Oh, she's
All the rest
beautiful.
were puppets. Yeah, and she just wanted to prove to the world that she just wasn't a sex symbol in the movies, that she actually had some talent other than the obvious talents on screen. So I got hired to do that, and when the season closed in St. Louis, because of cold weather, it always closed in October, I think. I was on my way to Hollywood, and that was one of my big dreams, was always to go to Hollywood. And we rehearsed in Hollywood for 2 weeks, and then we moved to the Las Vegas Hilton, which is a little off the strip, still is. I think now the name has been changed. But at that time, that's where Elvis played and Anne Margaret played. And then they moved Raquel in there. And we spent 6 wonderful weeks in Las Vegas. And if you don't grow up fast enough in your hometown, you grow up really fast in Las Vegas.
Yes,
it was
you do.
a whole new experience. But when that show finished, they asked me to come back. They knew I built puppets, and they asked me to come back and work in their shop. And I would do that during the winter months and then go back to St. Louis and work in the theater from March through October.
Oh, my.
And that went on for 5 years, I think, back and forth and back and forth. And I did a show at Madison Square Garden in New York for them at one point that was an arena show in the what was then the Felt Forum with Puff and Stuff, which was one of their characters.
I remember Puff and Stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So from Sid and Marty Krofft, I moved on to Hanna-Barbera Productions, which had a big costume department where they manufactured all the costume characters for the amusement parks. The Banana Splits and Scooby-Doo and Huckleberry Hound and all of those that we remember from our childhood. So I learned a lot more from that shop on how to build costume characters, and then they tried to get into puppets and puppetry and do some television pilots, but it just never quite worked. So
It was too soon, wasn't it?
well, they were trying to follow on the heels of the Muppets' success when the Muppets came back onto television. And it was a tough act to follow.
Yeah.
So that kind of all fizzled, and they eventually ended up closing the costume department. And so I started my own company in 1982.
Wow.
I said, you know, if I can build this stuff for these
Yeah.
people, I can do it for myself.
Exactly.
So I started my own company in 1982 and been at it ever since.
Yeah. And the amazing fact is that Pat has always stayed within your industry. From 5 years old, you stayed within the Hollywood, the movie world.
Right.
And you kind of moved along that way.
And when I first started the hobby with puppets, my father would say things like, "When is Pat going to stop playing with those damn dolls?" Well, I wish he had been alive to see what I've
those
managed,
damn
what those damn
dolls.
dolls have done for me,
Exactly.
which is
Exactly.
a pretty good career, and I've loved every minute of it. It's been great.
A very successful career.
Yeah. And the nice thing about owning your own business is that it's twofold. You can have a shop where puppets and costumes are being made, but then I can go out and do puppeteering at the same time, whether it's with my own puppets or somebody else's. And that's how I did a lot of the films and things that I worked on.
Talking about your films, Pat has worked on quite a few films. Would you tell us,
Well, let's see.
aside from Caddy Shack, which we all love,
Yeah, after Caddy Shack, I did the first Muppet movie. And
who did you play?
I played a lot of different characters. I did a lot of background characters because at that time the Muppets had all of their own featured players that played Kermit and Miss Piggy and Fozzie and all of those. But they had hundreds of background characters, so I always was put on one of those in the background. But I was a workshop assistant on that movie, which meant maintaining and wrangling puppets and taking care of them. So that was
So kind
great.
of explain to our audience wrangling puppets.
It's just what it says. The puppets, they're great and they come to life when they're on the puppeteer's arm.
Yeah.
But then the minute they come off of the arm, they have to be cared for, just like any other costume piece or a prop that is very delicate. So when the puppets come off, they are given to a wrangler, who then puts them on the puppet stand, takes them back to the workshop where they're either redressed or repaired or whatever, and then they bring them back to the set to be used again. So they're kind of like the runners
Okay.
for
all
the
right.
puppets.
So for example, Muppets, they usually kind of change scenes. So that means that they need to go back and change clothes, basically.
Well, also, too, you have to remember a lot of times there's duplicates of the puppets in order to speed up production.
Right. Right.
Can I digress to Sheri for a moment?
Oh, sure. Go ahead.
When we did the Lamb Chop play-along series for PBS, we would build about 6 new lamb chops every season for Sheri. And they were all built right on her hand because they had to move and they could make the expressions according to what she did with her fingers. So it was very important that the puppet be built on her hand. So we did the head on her hand, and then the rest of the parts of the body would be made in my shop while we were doing the head.
Okay. Well, she had a very small hand.
Yeah, she did. Very tiny,
Yeah.
a child-sized hand. But we would build all of these puppets at the beginning of each season, and by the end of the season, we had about 20 lamb chops that we could use in the course of the season. And so if it was a complicated scene where lamb chop had to be in different costumes, or we would film usually in sequence on that show, and from the beginning of the show through the end of the show, we could have all the lamb chops dressed for different scenes or rigged to do her different tricks for different scenes in advance,
Okay.
so it wouldn't slow down production. That's
Okay.
what she was so insistent about, was being able to have somebody that could do all of that for her
Yeah.
and have all the puppets ready to go and rigged. It cost a lot of extra dollars because there had to be duplicate costumes built for the puppets that did different things in the same scene.
And it's not easy to find someone that after you meet with them and you hire them, I mean, you and Sheri had to be like this. I mean, you had to be,
We were very close, literally.
yeah.
Just let me explain to your audience that, and because people get very confused about this, I was not the principal puppeteer for Sheri. She was the principal puppeteer who operated Lamb Chop
Yeah.
and the mouth and did the voice because that was her. And all of the interaction was between she and Lamb Chop, sometimes between she and another character in Lamb Chop. There was also Charlie Horse and Hush Puppy. But I would do I would be underneath her the whole time, literally, doing, pulling strings and operating rods to make Lamb Chop's arms operate or her legs kick or whatever. So that's basically what I did. But then the minute we were done with the scene, I would take the puppet from her and take it away, give it to a wrangler, and I'd get the other puppet, put it on her hand, and we'd go on.
Yeah, and it's hard to find someone that is that in tuned with you, to work with you, to think a step ahead of you in order to get that done. I mean, I can picture you taking the puppet off her hand, getting ready to go into another scene. Maybe she's changing clothes or something like that. You're getting the other puppet, and there you go. I mean, you're back into that other scene right away.
That's the reason she hired me in the beginning. I went in to interview with her because she was looking for a new puppeteering partner, as she liked to call it.
Okay.
But she wanted a puppeteer who could build puppets and who was a puppeteer that could also double for her. Like frequently I did Hush Puppy when it was supposed to be her.
Yeah.
But if he had to leave the scene or if he was doing something in the background or foreground, I could be doing Hush Puppy while she was doing something else.
Right.
Because I could fit into that puppet. Well, actually, we made puppets that I fit into, that I could double on. But she wanted a puppeteering partner that could build the puppets and be a puppeteer and also rig the puppets to do all of these tricks. So that's when she found out I could do that. And
Yeah. I mean, puppeteering is not an easy art. It's gone on
there's
centuries.
There's an old saying in the puppetry world of if it's comfortable, something is wrong.
It's wrong. You never get too comfortable with anything.
No, never.
No.
But it's like I said, never a dull moment.
No, absolutely not. Now, going back to Perry Como for a moment.
Okay.
Michelle Lee was in the cab with the puppets.
She was never in the cab. She was always on the outside of
Right.
the cab. I was inside the cab, and then Michelle Lee and the other two puppets were right up by the cab window. And the camera just cropped us off, at Michelle and the other puppets off at the waist, so you couldn't see the puppeteers below, of course.
Right. So now you're going to the Perry Como show with Michelle Lee as a guest on the show? Was that what?
She was a guest on the show, and then
Okay.
the puppets were from a company called Peppercorn Productions, and they were also classified as a guest star in the show.
Oh, okay.
So that's how that all came about.
Now, going back to a lot of people, you're not going to remember the Ed Sullivan show and the puppets he would have, the one with the hand talking.
That was Senor Winches, who was another incredible ventriloquist. He had the talking head in the box, you remember?
Oh, I remember the talking head in the box, yeah.
The hand was named Johnny, the talking hand, but I can't remember what the name of the head in the box was. It was something like Pedro, or I don't remember. And then Topo Gigio.
Oh, Topo Gigio. A little mouse for the people who never heard of Topo Gigio. But our generation
Grew up with all that.
grew up with all of that. I mean, it was an imagination. It was creating the puppets and the scenes, and people cracked up laughing naturally. And to this day, how many years is it since the Ed Sullivan show? Since we watched Topo Gigio and all of that. It's a good 40.
Long time. Oh,
long-
yeah.
Good 40 years ago
Yeah,
for all of that. So,
easily.
yeah.
But it, thanks to the Muppets, puppetry kind of went through a renaissance, and it is back now. It's a little bit of a dicey situation because computer-generated images came into the film and television industry, and that kind of slowed the puppet work down because they were able to do so much with computer-generated images. But I think the live-action puppets are starting to come back into popularity now because CGI work is wonderful. It's terrific. But at a certain point, it loses the magic because everybody just goes, they did it with a computer. You can do anything with a computer.
Yeah.
That's why I think live puppetry has so much more charm to it.
Oh, I agree.
And I think you can buy into it, even though, I mean, a lot of the kids today are far more sophisticated than you and I were when Howdy Doody was on, and they know it's not real.
Yeah.
But it's still a great art form.
It's an art form. when you're able to do a puppet show and have young kids get used to it as they're growing up. Nowadays, you're right, the special effects, everything going into it, takes away a lot of the art form that goes with a puppetry.
Hmm.
Now, explain to the audience that, I mean, a puppet marionette.
Well, all the forms of puppets are puppets.
Okay,
But
all
a
right.
marionette is a stringed puppet.
Mhm.
And then you have the hand puppet, which is more like the Sheri Lewis characters.
Yeah.
And then you have the larger hand and rod puppets, which are the Muppet style of puppet.
Which we are seeing more so nowadays.
Yeah, you see a lot of that now.
Yeah.
A lot of that. And of course, the Muppets are still, active and doing things. But that's generally the puppet ends here about the waist, and the camera crops it off right here. And in television and film puppetry, the puppeteer is up here with the puppet and watching a monitor down below
Mm-hmm.
so that they can stand and move around.
Yeah.
And their head is down, so that helps with the camera. So that's another style. And there's shadow puppets, which are just the flat puppets. Sometimes just can be in black and white silhouettes, or sometimes they have colored papers on them so that the light shows through and they're in color. There is what they call bunraku style puppets, which started in Japan, that are full-bodied puppets
Mm-hmm.
with legs and everything that are operated by puppeteers from behind.
Wow.
That are just beautiful, and they're very intricate, and it's quite a historical art in Japan. But those have translated into a lot of the things we do with modern puppetry. But instead of puppeteers being dressed in black, standing right behind the puppets, they're now dressed in what they call green suits, from head to toe covered in green, that matches the green screen behind where the puppets are being shot. And then, of course, the puppeteers totally disappear,
Mm-hmm.
but can operate the arms and legs on the
Yeah.
puppet, and then whatever image they want to lay into the scene behind the puppet, they're able to do because of the technology of green screen.
A green screen.
Yeah.
Yeah. Absolutely.
So there's a lot of different styles of puppetry, and there's huge puppets up on poles that are. There's one company called the Bread and Puppet Theater,
Okay.
Bread and Puppet Theater, somewhere here on the East Coast. Oh gosh, there's lots of things. There's, and of course, don't let me forget famous audio animatronic puppetry that's done now. There's one arena show that was out last year and a newer one this year. One was called Walking with Dinosaurs, which had all of these life-size dinosaurs, but
I remember that. Yeah.
they were operated by radio controls by puppeteers up in the top of the arena, and they actually could walk on the arena floor. It was amazing what they could do with the radio controlled stuff, which is another
Absolutely.
form of puppetry.
Absolutely.
You know?
Now, just to go back for a second, I mean, to explain to the audience about monitors. I mean, that's another technique there with the monitors, that when you have your arms up and you're working a puppet and you're looking down, isn't everything backwards?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So you've got to think, as we say, camera right, camera left, but you're looking down here and everything is backwards from what you're doing up here.
Yeah.
So that's a whole other.
For example, if you were Michelle Lee and I was the puppet down here and I'd be watching a monitor, if I would just naturally, the monitor would make it feel like I should go this way. But I just had to remember that Michelle Lee was actually on my right, but it was reversed on the camera monitor.
Right.
So you had to do everything in reverse, and it's a little tricky until you get used to it.
I mean, you have to really focus in. I mean,
Oh, it is.
because it's really, you have to be in what I call a zone where he's up there, Michelle Lee's over here, and, you can't afford to make a mistake. So
Nope.
you really need to learn your art. You really need to be on point, on target. So it's a very, when you're in show mode, it's about all you can do. To be able to focus and be in tune with Sheri or Michelle Lee. Now, didn't you work with Steve and Edie? Did they?
No.
Okay.
I had a very good friend who did. That's probably what you're thinking.
Okay. Because I was thinking about, because they do their shows in Las Vegas all the time. And are they still around?
No.
Oh.
Occasionally he does a show by himself, but
she's
they
not,
no
okay.
longer are performing together.
Oh, well,
There you go.
maybe should not have gone down that road. Okay. So now you also Pat did a movie during the election. And the movie, that was a Bush election.
Oh, are you talking about Team America?
Talking about Team America.
Team America World Police.
Yes.
That was a rather adult puppet feature.
Yes, it was. There were two versions of that.
Well, yeah.
The X-rated and then the public.
R-rated.
R-rated. Okay, R-rated. But I do have a copy of it, thanks to Pat, and I have the X-rated. But that's beside the point. But that one, the set design on that, wasn't there dollar signs in the road that people wouldn't pick up on? You would just look at the whole set.
You're close.
Okay.
Yeah.
What
well,
was it?
You have to. A lot of people may not have seen the movie, but it was the puppets were marionettes, but they were only about 18 inches tall.
Okay.
And they were operated by strings, and the puppeteers on the strings were up, sometimes 35, 50 feet above the puppet because the sets were enormous. They were huge. And they had to get the puppets into different areas of the set, so they couldn't build platforms or catwalks across the set, so they had us in cherry pickers.
Oh, really?
Literally. They could go up to any height we needed, or they could be moved around over any part of the set. But yeah, the set designers were very clever on the set. In France, when the film opens, they're on a cobblestone street in France, in Paris, and the cobblestones were all made out of croissants.
Right.
Well, they weren't really croissants,
no,
but they were meant to look like croissants.
Yeah.
Another scene in Cairo, out in the desert, all the palm trees, the palm fronds were made out of dollar bills.
Okay, that's where the money was. Okay.
Yeah, that's what you're thinking about, the money.
Yeah.
There was just so much stuff. It was so funny. But I have to tell people that film was produced and directed by the two gentlemen who do South Park, Trey Parker and Matt Stone.
Okay.
Who also did the musical that's on Broadway now, Book of Mormon. So it was a pretty, oh gosh, how do we phrase this? It was a pretty irreverent film.
Yes, it was.
But a lot of fun to work on because there were just like 50 or 60 puppeteers on it all the time. It was great.
Yeah.
A lot of characters.
Well, what impressed me the most about that was that every scene was so involved, detailed in the set design. I watched it probably 4 times, and every time I watched it, I was, oh yeah, that's right.
You see something else. Yeah.
You see something else, and puppeteering marionettes with that came a long, long way with that movie. A very long way.
Well, they did, but at the same time they chose to use marionettes because of the jerky string action.
Right.
They wanted it to be funny and a tongue-in-cheek kind of play on puppet films, but nonetheless, it was still great.
Oh,
it was so funny and a lot of fun to work on, and a big challenge too at the same time.
Oh, absolutely. Now, going back to your movies, not only with Caddy Shake, with Team America, you did My Mother is an Alien.
My Stepmother is an Alien. Oh, wait a minute. Yes. My Stepmother is an Alien. I get that confused with So I Married an Axe Murderer.
Well, it's so easy to get those confused.
Yeah, and they're really some of the finest films you'll ever see. But let's see, My Stepmother is an Alien had Kim Basinger and Dan Aykroyd in it, and she was an alien, and she came down to Earth to steal some scientific secret that was being made that she needed to save her planet. And she, of course, came in human form, and she carried a purse around. And the purse was called Purse. But inside the purse was another alien creature, which was, of course, a puppet called Purse. But it was like a snake with an eyeball on the end of it.
Uh-huh.
And that was me. So on this one, instead of having to spend a lot of time underneath Sheri Lewis, this time I get to spend a lot of time under Kim Basinger,
Okay.
which was pretty exciting work.
I'm sure.
We got to become very close.
You'd have to become very close.
So that was fun. And then here's another example of puppetry. You know the movie because you and I just watched it. So I Married an Axe Murderer with Mike Myers. And people are going, what puppets are in that movie? Well, this is an example of taking objects that really aren't considered puppets, but they are operated by a puppeteer. And you probably have never seen this movie. If you have, you'll know the scene at the end where Mike Myers is hanging on a rain gutter off the top of this Victorian mansion, which is, 40 feet off the ground. And there's a woman who is a mysterious axe murderer who is out on the roof with him trying to chop at his hands so he'll drop from the roof. Well, they couldn't very well have the stunt woman chopping an axe between Mike Myers' fingers. So they had their special effects department mold his hands and come up with rubber hands that matched his. So in the establishing shot, he really did have his hands up there. But when she started chopping at them with the axe, they substituted. He took his hands down and we put up 2 arms that had the same sleeves as his costume. And the rubber fingers I had taken and we ran monofilament like fish line up through the hand with a big long needle into the fingers so that the fingers could do this.
Wow.
So when they're hooked on the gutter, they aren't totally just frozen. They can move a little.
Yeah.
And that was, I was one of the puppeteers on one side and there was another puppeteer on the other side.
So your hand was in that glove?
No.
No.
We
You
were
working it.
We were holding on to the hand, and we had controls down here. We could move the fingers.
All right. Okay.
But this was a roof that they had built to match the roof on the real house, and it was only 6 feet off the ground.
Yeah. And
So
you'd
once
never
again,
know it.
we were right underneath him, and you'd never know it.
You'd never know it. I mean, it looked like they were hanging from 20 stories.
Oh yeah, they were.
Yeah.
The actual stunt people were.
Right.
It was a real house.
Right. But that corner of that shot, and Pat's name is at the end of all these movies, and
Yeah, I played Charlie's hands.
yeah, he played.
Charlie's hands, Pat Brymer. And people go, what? But that's another little
Yeah.
secret of puppeteering. It's different every time.
Every time. I mean, Mike Meyer in that, because as you said, we just watched this movie together, and this was before Mike Meyer did Austin Powers. So I was picking up on a lot of the things he took over to those 2 movies that he did. The guy that does this, he was already doing the voice for that.
Yeah.
The Irish,
Scottish father.
The Scottish father was the Scottish sumo wrestler.
Yeah.
The
And
voices were already coming then.
also Shrek.
Oh, Shrek.
He was the same Scottish voice.
Yeah, he's a Scottish voice in Shrek.
Yeah.
So it was interesting to watch and to see how all of that carried over to his future movies and what he was doing. But now, as far as your movies, which do you like better? Do you like doing, I mean, you're doing right now, Crayon Court, correct?
Well, that's a live children's show,
Right.
which is a stage show that's done for children's audiences primarily. It's done in large auditoriums, and the children are bussed in. They come in from schools to see the show, but it's an educational show for kids. It's done with a lot of music and very colorful full-size puppets. So we work right behind the puppets in black outfits, and there's it's teaching the children about color and music kind of at the same time. And it's great, and it's wonderful for me because that's how I started out, was in live theater with the Crofts in the live puppet theaters, marionette theaters. So it's fun to go back to this now.
Right.
It's great to have a live audience. I mean, film and television is wonderful, but you just don't have the same interaction
Right.
with the audience.
Right.
So yeah, that show I go out with a couple of times every year. It's fun.
Yeah. Now, they had Broadway, Avenue Q.
Hmm.
You and I went to see Avenue Q, I think.
I think it was you and my partner went to see it.
Right, okay. And all puppets, marionettes.
No, they were hand puppets. They were Muppet style puppets.
Muppets, okay. But that kind of threw me off. I didn't know if I liked it or not. Because I'm coming from a generation where a puppeteer
Is hidden.
is hidden.
Yeah, when they were right there.
And they were right, I mean, they're there, they're live. You see the person, you see the puppet working. And I wasn't sure there if I really, really liked it or not. I mean, it was a good play. And I would suggest everybody seeing it if you have the opportunity. But
Don't take the kids. No, no.
no, don't take the kids to this. But it's different, and coming from our generation, seeing that, it takes a while to get into the whole story that they're doing there. But it's the updated version. It's what people are doing nowadays.
It is.
It is.
But it's great that we can keep the art going.
Oh, absolutely. And it is an art, and it is a very intriguing, focused, detailed art. And I'm hoping we don't ever lose that with special effects.
So, support puppetry.
Always. Well, Pat, it's been great having you on our show.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Good to be here.
And we want to have you back again.
I would love to.
So when you come back to Maine, you're going to be on our show.
And bring stuff.
And bring stuff. We're going to have them bring stuff. Puppets and all kinds of photos.
Let's do a show.
Let's do a show. Well, thank you very much, everybody. I love spending time with you. And we'll see you again really soon. Bye-bye.